You don't move your bed.
It's the book of Ecclesiastes chapter 7, point is verse 8, and it reads, "Better is the end of a thing than the beginning thereof, and the patient in spirit is better than the proud in spirit." I'm going to reread it in the NLT, and it reads, "Finishing is better than starting, patience is better than pride." I want to start off by giving all praise, all honor, and all glory to call Elohim Yahweh, Shem Yahushua, Shem Kodash. Give honors to the elders and to the apostles that I learned this truth from. Peace and salutations to the Akim across the four corners of the earth, pushing this truth with faith and with sincerity, as well as risking their lives and their freedom to do so, now more so than ever. Shalom to the Akim and Aquat out there listening and learning. Lord willing, this is edifying. Shalom to the Israelite foreigners scattered abroad in the land of other nations, appearing like the other nations, but subscribe to this truth. To you, I say Shalom. To Brother Yahweh coming at you with another lesson through the Spirit, through the power of Yahweh, Shem Yahushua, Yahweh meaning He is, He exists, or He to be. Ba Hashem, Ba in, Ha's Lordship, His name. Yahushua meaning He saves, or He deliver. True names of the Most High God and His Son, whose people ignorantly call God, and Jesus Christ, whose true name in the Paleo Hebrew is Yahweh, Ba Hashem Yahushua. This lesson is inspired by I basically came across a video by the guy Patrick Humphrey. Give credit where credit's due, and he brings out a lot of informative information. Spirit jumped on me because he brought out this article, and it caught my attention because it made me think. I started with Ecclesiastes 7 and 8. Better is the end of a thing than the beginning thereof, because we watching the ending of Babylon the Great. I was listening to the beloved elder apostle go into, a lot of people think that 1776 is basically for July the July 4th, 1776, but in the actuality is for May Day, May 1st, 1776, because that was the inception of the Illuminatis, and basically this fiat currency and Babylon the Great and the Great Enterprise, basically, because Babylon, through Babylon the Great, aka America, is supposed to lead to this NWO, this New World Order, This caught my attention, and although I went to check it out, they say that today he ended it. He passed the funding bill, but it just shows you that how spiritually this place is over with. It's all by design ultimately, but you got an idiot. Pretty much. They talk about how the captain, usually sinks with the ship, but Babylon the Great, you think Neo or Nero, 47 or DJ Trump is going to actually go down with this place collapsing? This man, they say, has made billions of dollars since he's been in the office, which again shows you his mindset. This is a place that pretty much was a moneymaker for the elites, and now it's coming to an end. And that's why it's going to be impoverished and ultimately be destroyed. But this caught my attention because, again, you got troops over in, the Middle East that's literally about to go to war, and they're being rationed, they're rationing their food. So it makes you question, like, well, damn, how is you going to actually, fight a war when you at half strength, And then you had basically Department of Homeland Security, it pretty much has been shut down, because of the fact of, the ICE and, all these different things. But, pretty much it's just showing you the state of decay that Babylon the Great is in, and it's not going to get better. It's going to get worse. These things, that these moves that they're making is ultimately going to affect and hurt this place. So why do you think or see, how can you possibly see a future in this place? I was talking to an Israelite today. I started a new job, and it's funny how the Lord doing me. You know what I mean? Some people will get ecstatic. I was listening to the elder broke in the news, and he was going into how he can't wait till this shit be over with, because he was going into I remember the elder was the first one brought it out about how you can't access the King James online. You can't access it, and that's spiritual in of itself, because the thing is, the scriptures talk about the doors of mercy being closed, and basically having access to the Bible and the ability. Scriptures talk about in Amos chapter 8 and verse 11 about how it's going to be a famine of the word, not a famine of bread, but for hearing. Because it's comfort and joy and hope in these scriptures. Wisdom and knowledge being the stability of thy times, peace and salvation, fear of the Lord is his treasure. And these people don't have the fear of the Lord as of now, but they will before it's over with. When you actually have to eat your child in order to sustain yourself. Because a person that doesn't have any hope or trust or belief in anything but with some carnal, they'll do anything. They'll eat anything. I was just going into that about how like witches and warlocks, they'll fast. They're disciplined enough to, even though they might be doing it for a left-hand purpose, they're disciplined enough to give up something, as opposed to a two-third nigga or these heathen that don't even truly believe. What are you going to sacrifice? What, these fasts is preparing Jake, because at one point in time, we were in the world, you would have probably thought, well, I can't go without eating 3 times a day. You thinking that's healthy, when in actuality, you only really need to eat once a day, Again, you got certain people that, might have health issues where they, bear with me for a second. Certain individuals that can't, fast, or they have to eat because of, health issues or whatnot. But for the most part, not to be stuffing your face all day. But, I'm all over the place. This caught my again because, like, that Babylon the Great is falling. When in actuality, I was talking. Vietnam, they didn't. Other wars, the only one that I think that they really won was World War II when they fought Japan, and they was already surrendering. So, again, this place is a joke, like the picks on the little guy, and he Northern Kingdom, he an Ephraimite, like, because he was like, when he was growing up, he was into Catholicism, so I explained to him, what it was, and I was like, basically, he was like, when he was younger, he was into it to a degree, but like not so more, he's not religious, but I was like, I believe it's the way that you learned the Bible, because again, everybody might be reading out the same book, but they not coming with the same message. And that's why you got the good news. You got the gospel, the good news. Because when you go into the understanding of these nations had us as Israelites, you so-called blacks, Hispanics, Native Americans, Seminole Indians, West Indians, and Haitians in captivity and subjection. And the good news is we're gonna get the power to have them in subjection and captivity. That's true justice, justice is what was done to you happens to, why do you think they delivered a death penalty to an individual that might have pretty much like took a life? Because of the fact that's justice. You killed somebody, so now they'll let you get killed. Now, sometimes that doesn't take place because it's all the will of the Lord, but nonetheless, justice is what was done to you happening to the person that did that to you. That's true justice. And the Lord's going to give us that. And that's how all the rights will be made wrong. But again, this is an indication of this place being with because of the fact, the so-called supposedly greatest military, which again, I don't think they're the greatest military. I think that they're, everywhere I go is fucking police. This is crazy. Everywhere I go is pretty much, it's like, I don't think they're the greatest military. I think they spend the most money on the military budget, But, now they not even, and it's funny too, because again, the Coast Guard is supposed to protect our coast, but they said that pretty much they haven't been funding the Coast Guard to the point where these people haven't, they're joined onto the government, but haven't been able to get their paychecks, haven't been able to pay, mortgages and pay to live, And that's what you get for trusting in the horde, Babylon the Great, aka America. I'm gonna read a little bit of this. It says, The U.S. Coast Guard cannot pay its bills. The military branch, now 76 days into the longest shutdown in U.S. history, owes over $300 million in unpaid obligations, and with thousands of utility bills overdue, totaling $5.2 million, duty stations and military housing worldwide are facing service shutdowns. It seems like a horror movie. Now again, like I say, I went to go look this up today because I came across the information through the Spirit watching the guy Patrick Humphrey, and I tried to look up. I was being lazy. I didn't try to look up the exact article he was reading. I just put it in the search, and it was like they ended it today. But again, at what cost? You know what I mean? That just puts Babylon the Great in more debt. It makes the service members more frustrated. It's putting a spirit on the people, like the brother was going into how, when people lose everything, they lose it, you know what I mean? Or how, you got these people ready to snap. You got, again, it shows you how much of a tyrant DJ Trump is as opposed to a leader. He wants to bully you into subjection. So that's why he's considered, like the elder said, the cruel lord. A cruel lord, a true leader inspires devotion and servitude, But a dictator, again, it makes me think of that Lord of the Rings. I can't pronounce her name, but the one female elf, she was like, "Oh, will love me in despair." You know what I mean? So she like, "You gonna be hopeless, but you gonna love me. I'm your God." Makes you think of the black woman. You can't have no other woman but me, right? Nah, bitch. But anyhow, it seems like a horror movie, but it's actually happening. It's almost unbelievable. Coast Guard Commander Admiral Kevin Lundy told CBS News in an exclusive interview. Suddenly the lights go out. Now again, I would have did this because I got to go out on the highways and hedges. I would have did a lesson on this, but they ended it. But you still can do a lesson on this because this is significant. Again, like I say, how are you gonna go to war? They it's a saying in the streets. You can't beef if you ain't got. You can't go to war if you ain't got no money. Like some of these companies will take you to war financially, and they know like you could be dead right and they could be dead wrong, and because of the fact that how the system is set up, they can pretty much have you exhaust your funds in order to they just leave it tied up in court, and then when you run out of money, then it's over with. That's what Birdman used to do with some of his artists. They trying to sue him for a certain amount. He'll prolong the shit up until a point where these people starve, and pretty much then they'll accept anything they give them. Air Station Barbers Point, Hawaii is that the government can't afford its bills, and you got people that got trust in this place. You's a fucking idiot if you trust in this. If you trust in this white, and like I said, with all these different things going on, it's gonna have to be Revelation 12 and 12. You know what I mean? Again, people sit up there show you they don't give a fuck. Oh, Trump trying to say, oh, they try to kill me. Motherfuckers like, we don't give a fuck. They wish. You have people say they wish that something would have happened to him. So again, I think the whole, that so-called assassination attempt was a way to gauge the feelings and the mindset of the people, and then show you how silly people is. Even after all these different arrests and people announcing they gonna do this and fuck the president online and people being arrested, you still got people making social media comments and whatnot. That's how they gonna use what you said as persecution. And we saw that coming back when they was doing it in the UK and in the land of Moab and these other nations. It says a power outage at a recruiting station in St. Louis, Missouri forced officers to operate by flashlight until electricity could be restored. That's embarrassing. Electricity was also cut off to the residents of Coast Guard Rear Admiral in New Orleans, forcing his family to drive to a hotel until service was restored. That residence is one of nearly 1,000 Coast Guard housing units at risk of electricity shutdowns because of unpaid bills. And that just shows you like the uncaring and cold nature of these people. You either think that's all, again, this place is a joke. I thought that you could commandeer and you could just do certain things, but you got these. They're showing you that the companies is really your government. These companies, these corporations have the power. You thinking the government got the control? No, because the government borrows and gets funding and get money from these corporations. That's why it's these corporations that's actually pushing policies that's going to bring forth the NWO. So, if you want to read this article, I might say this, but if you want to read it, see what it's titled, Coast Guard Operating in Crisis as DHS Shutdown, Halts Pay in May. But again, from what I read, it says pretty much they pretty much passed the funding bill. But, again, with these kind of actions, all it can do is lead to inevitable, downfall of Babylon the Great. So I got 2 scriptures, you see the phone about to die, and I can't charge it. So try to catch it before it dies. It's the book of Revelation, chapter 18, and starting at verse, oh, wow. That's crazy, because literally I just looked up the scripture and I won't let you do it. That's crazy. That's kind of scary too. Can't connect to site. I think they just said something about blue letters. Well, let me get it out of this one. That's crazy. Look, they were just about the King James. I literally just pulled both scriptures up and now it won't let me. This book of Revelation, chapter 8. Hey, this is a beautiful thing. Your pot thing, like the brother said, because again, that's the Lord taking away access. He's sealing up the gates. He's pretty much not allowing. That's the famine of the word coming. This is the book of Revelation, chapter 18 and verse. I'm gonna start at verse 1. Babylon is fallen, and after these things I saw another angel come down from heaven, having great power, and the earth was lighted with his glory. And he cried mightily, with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the Great is fallen, and has become the habitation of devils, and the hold of every foul spirit, and a cage of every unclean and hateful bird. For all the nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication, and the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth are waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies. Verse 4, and I heard another voice from heaven saying, come out of her, my people, which is you so-called blacks, Hispanics, Native Americans, Seminole Indians, West Indians, and Haitians, because it tells you in the book of Isaiah, I believe, it talks about how all those that are rejoined unto her shall be thrust through. What's that? Ezekiel chapter 9, smite every man, woman, and child that does not have that tuwa, that mark of exemption. So if you join onto this place, you're going to be destroyed with this place. And I heard another voice from heaven saying, come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sins, that ye receive not of her plagues, for her sins have reached unto heaven, and the Most High remembered her iniquities. So, you want to come out of the mindset of this place, because you may not be able to physically come out of this place. Again, we're poor. I was just talking to Jake, and he was going into, he talked about the rich. Jake knows some shit, you know what I mean? Because he was going into how he knew what the mark of the beast was, so that made it even more beautiful. Like I said, I put it out there because of the fact, Northern Kingdom, and I was like, a lot of times when I talk to Northern Kingdom brothers, I'll be like, well, I'll give them the page, because I had the page for the brothers in Cali, because they did like a lot of their classes just in Spanish. And he was intrigued to a degree, but he never asked for it, so I never really tried to give it to him, you know what I mean? But, it's out there, you know what I mean? At the end of the day, the doors of mercy are truly closing. But he was talking about how he took a class in college, and basically he was going into analyzing or analytical thinking. He went into pretty much how he was like, it's called like analyzing or analytical thinking or critical thinking. You know what I mean? Not, a person that critically thinks is not easily manipulated, because they know how to think for themselves. That's what one thing, and he was saying how the teacher was presenting the information. He was like, just don't go by what I say. And that's how the elders are. They'll give you information, but they'll be like, don't just take our word for it. Look it up yourself, because that's the best way to learn. You could get some information from somebody, but you don't know if it's true or not, because you have to find that information for yourself. So this is the book of Jeremiah, chapter 51, because at the end of the day, just based on the greatest military supposedly in the world pretty much can't pay his bills. So how do you think you're going to win this war? This is the book of Jeremiah, chapter 51, and starting at verse 6. Flee out of the midst of Babylon, which is aka America, and deliver every man his soul. Be not cut off in her iniquity, for this is the time of the Lord's Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahshah's vengeance. He will render unto her a recompense. Babylon hath been a golden cup in the Lord's hand that made all the earth drunken. The nations have drunken of her wine, therefore the nations are mad. Babylon is suddenly fallen and destroyed. How for her take balm for her pay? If so be she may be healed. We would have healed Babylon, but she is not healed. Forsake her, and let us go everyone into his own country, for her judgment reacheth unto heaven. For her judgment reacheth unto heaven, and is lifted up even to the skies. And that's why it talks about the sins of this place reaching onto the heavens in Revelation chapter 18. But it also talks about, I forgot where it's at, but it talks about the smoke of this place, I think it's in Revelation, is going to reach onto the heavens as well. So for the sins of this place reaching on the heavens, the destruction of this place is going to reach onto the heavens as well. So I just wanted to bring that out again. That's just another faith booster for the true believers, because again, this place is over with if it can't afford to pay its soldiers. And Rome showed you, ancient Rome showed you that.